Welcome to the Providers Report, where we delve into the world of value-based healthcare. Our mission is to empower healthcare providers with the knowledge and tools they need to deliver exceptional patient care. Each episode, we explore best practices, innovative strategies, and real-world examples of how to achieve the highest standards in patient communication and outcomes. Join us as we transform the future of healthcare, one conversation at a time.
Hey guys, welcome to Better Doctor Project, where we interview healthcare providers to tap into their experiences so we can turn our challenges into our biggest strengths. We hope today's episode inspires you to take that next step to become who you want to be in practice. I'm Dr. Beck.
And I'm Dr. Mack.
Let's get started. Hey all, it's Dr. Beck. Welcome to episode 14. We're bringing back Tim Vaughn, a licensed mental health counselor, to fill us in on geriatric depression. The vast majority of us are not in the world of mental health, which is why it's even more important for us to know how to help these patients who are suffering from this kind of condition. What's really exciting though is that just by adding a quick little conversation here and there with these patients can really go a long way when it comes to their recovery. Geriatric depression is definitely something you don't want to let slip under your radar. And remember, we have just one more episode remaining for season 1 of Better Doctor Project. Thank you so much for following us on this new journey every step of the way since our launch this June. We hope each episode continues to inspire you and guide you to being better every single day. Let's dive into today's episode. Hey everybody, we are here with Dr. Tim Vaughn, and today we are going to be talking about depression within a very, very special population, the geriatric population. Obviously, this topic is extremely important, but on top of that, a lot of people really don't know how to address it appropriately and how to know when things are more serious, when things are a little bit more lax. So what Tim's going to do tonight for us is just chat with us about how we in other fields of healthcare can really attack this head on and help our patients get to a great place. So again, thank you so much for being with us here today, Tim.
Thanks again. Appreciate it.
So first and foremost, would you say that this is something that occurs with many elderly people and patients, or is this something that is less common? Do we know what the numbers look like right now for the geriatric population when it comes to depression?
Well, I actually have a number. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention says 1 to 5% of the general elderly population have depression or encounter depression at some point. I think it's hard to get a number because it can look so differently in this population than others.
In what ways does it look different?
Well, with depression in the elderly, it can sometimes present itself in body aches, headaches, back aches, various physical symptoms, as well as forgetfulness, cognitive decline, which I don't think is necessarily is different than other populations, but I think because of the elderly population, we expect that that's going to be happening. But sometimes I think it's difficult to sift through what may be something else versus what could be depression, and these are the byproducts of that.
Some of those things really look similar. I know my grandmother is 95 right now, and still going strong. But she actually had, we were at a wedding, and my cousin's wedding, and she's dancing. This was about 8 years ago. She's dancing on the floor. She sits down a little out of breath, and she's like, "Oh, this is beautiful." And she's watching the festivities, and a guy next to her leans in and said, "Isn't this a beautiful wedding?" And she said, "What wedding?" Boom, gone. Didn't know where she was. Didn't know what was going on. Had no idea. She could recognize us. She couldn't tell who the president was, but she could describe him, and we thought, this is it. This is the end. Oh my gosh, here it comes. Turns out she just had a UTI, right? Because that can present as dementia. And I'm so grateful I learned that then, because I've encountered that many times with my patients or with family members who are talking about their elderly family members. And so I learned that the things, especially in this population, they masquerade as other issues.
Yes.
So that's a great illustration of
Yeah.
that kind of situation.
Yes. It's hard to know. It's hard to know what kind of accurate numbers we can give.
So of that percentage, whether it might be a little higher or what do you think are some risk factors that may have led to depression in that population? What are some things that might make an elderly patient more likely to develop depression as opposed to someone else?
I think it's all the life changes. If you look, we were talking previously about TED Talk, and something that I have recommended to the elderly, some of my elderly clients, is Robert Waldinger. What Makes a Good Life? Lessons from the Longest Study on Happiness. It's a 75-year study that Harvard did. I think it's the longest study that's ever been done, or something similar to that. But he talks about what makes happiness, and a lot of the times there's so many life changes, there's losses. When we retire, if we don't replace our workmates with other friends, there's isolation such as that, and there's a loss of purpose, and that's huge. You're probably familiar with the study of like the babies, that were in the Soviet Union, and these were these were babies that were fed, clothed, but they weren't talked to. They weren't, spoken to or picked up and held. And a third of them died. Another third of them developed some severe learning disabilities, and then another third of them, I think, did end up being okay. Now, hopefully, don't quote me on exactly this, but I'm fairly accurate on, I think, these findings. And I think it applies also to the elderly population, in that oftentimes what happens, they may lose a spouse, but there's a lot of loss that surrounds that. And if it's not replaced with something where they're receiving affection, they go out and they, like you were talking about your 95-year-old grandmother going out and doing things. Depression absolutely is inevitable, I think, because the brain is not stimulated. There's no sense of purpose, I guess you could say.
It's so important. I mean, even I see it even earlier than that, the beginning of it, people who are ready to retire and they're excited about retirement, but they're also like, what do I do with myself now? And speaking of 95-year-olds and purpose, I actually this week had a new patient. He is 95 and he's amazing. And he comes in, he's I guess retired, obviously, but racehorse trainer, right? Horses are his life. Comes in with a Preakness ball cap. I mean, he's just phenomenal. Has a healthcare advocate with him. And he has never been to a chiropractor before, had it done on all his horses, of course, but not for himself. And he was referred by his MD for back pain. And he comes in and he tells me what's going on. And his health advocate says, listen, our goal is to get him back to training horses. He needs to go back to training horses. He's been resting for a few months due to some other health issues, but he's got to get back to training horses. And I just love that. I said, okay, guys, we have a goal, and I got excited about that because I know she has horses and I know that getting some movement into his life, movement is amazing. That's why we do what we do in our profession. But it's amazing the effect movement can have on mood too. And so it got me thinking, though, I know he might have access to some horses, so I know this goal might be realistic. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, I saw him for the second time this week, and he came in today and said, Doc, I'm 95% better. I'm ready to go train. So I thought that was really exciting. But it made me think about, realistic motivation for this age population and unrealistic motivation, because you don't want to dangle the carrot, right, too far ahead, but you also want them to have that sense of purpose. And if that's what drives him, like, this is the kind of guy I know would rather lose his life in the middle of a field because he messed up and got trampled by a horse than sit on his watching his television for the next 10 extra years of his life. And so how do you manage expectations and motivation in this population as you're trying to encourage them to make, certain changes or look at the world differently?
Yeah. Wow. That's a hard question to answer. Well, I will tell you, as far as exercises we're talking about, there's a lady named Miranda Esmond White. She has a program called Aging Backwards. And one of the things she talks about in this is that a lot of the times we slow down because we stop moving. And I don't know how to answer that because I don't know. I don't know where the expectations can stop. I remember Dr. Amen, Daniel Amen, familiar with him, was talking about his father was 95 years old. And he said his father was eating bad food and it kind of slipped into a depression. And he kind of got motivated. And he said, my dad was doing a 6-minute plank after like 9 months of exercise, So at 95 years old doing it, I can't do that. I couldn't do that at 23 years old. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't know. I wish I could. I wish I could give you a better answer. As to
I feel like every patient's going to be different too. I mean, if someone's 95 years old and that's the day they wanted to start racing horses, that might be different than it being their whole life. I know I recently had a really good friend's father come see me for care. And the only reason he came is because he couldn't mountain bike because his back pain was so bad. And I looked at his chart and he was like, I believe late 60s. And I'm thinking to him, like, I couldn't mountain bike. How is he mountain biking?
Mm-hmm.
So I started to poke and prod a little bit. I'm like, okay, let's set a few goals. And so I'm thinking he's saying mountain biking, but maybe he means it's like a road bike, but like with mountains in the background. And I kid you not, he's literally full blown mountain biking 12 plus miles at a time.
Wow.
I couldn't even road bike 12 miles.
Right.
And so in that moment, I had to realize, okay, this is crazy to me, but for him, this is all he wants right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I realized that it was attainable, I was like, okay, this is our goal. And then I aligned that with his care. After X number of visits, I was like, let's have that bike ride.
Mm-hmm.
And he did. And he was so happy. I mean, and this is a man who couldn't even bend forward to pick something off the ground at the time.
Yeah.
And just a few visits in, now he's back mountain biking. He's doing what he loves. And you could tell that just missing his main hobby was really negatively affecting him as a whole person.
Sure. Again, sense of purpose, passion.
Absolutely.
I think you guys did answer it because really it's the answer is it depends on the patient, and there's literally no limits necessarily to what the mind can do and how the mind can impact the body. We've seen all kinds of studies in neuroscience where, the brain, you can trick the brain into thinking maybe there's a limb where a phantom limb once was. I mean, the power of the mind is so strong, and the fact that it can have chemical, physiological effects on the body, I think really means that there's a very, amorphous limitation to what we can do. It's vast. So I think that is an answer.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a major question for you personally. So most healthcare professions, they're doing some kind of health history and physical exam when they're meeting somebody, especially, at a physician level, like Dr. Mack and I, when we do our initial intake and our exam, I want to make sure that the people listening know what they can possibly change with their exam to better accommodate this population in terms of depression. So let's say you're looking at a patient's intake form and they've already marked on there specifically that they're having depression.
Uh-huh.
Should that trigger us to do some kind of outcome assessment? Should that trigger us to do something unique with our physical exam? Should that trigger us to ask a certain question? I feel like I had minimal training in that. But I know I personally, when I see depression and anxiety on an intake, I know what questions to ask because of my time with Dr. Neff at the VA. You know, I'm always asking them their current status. Do you have a counselor that you trust? Because I've had it go both ways. I've had patients say, you know, I was doing well, but now I'm not. And then I'll say, great. Well, do you have someone you can talk to? You know, have you seen a counselor before? Have you seen a psychiatrist before? And some of them will say, yeah, I have a great one. I see him every 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say, great. Do you trust that person? You know, have you had a good relationship? And sometimes they'll say, yeah. And sometimes they'll say, well, you know, it's been a while since I've seen them. I'm kind of looking for someone else. So I feel like I know a couple questions to ask, but is there anything I'm missing? Is there something I should add from your standpoint? How would you guide us in that direction?
If you're believing that they could benefit from talking to somebody more, or that they're looking for someone else, I think it'd be good to ask, what is it about this current counselor that you're, or whomever, that you're not jiving with, you know? And that's like we talked about previously, in having a resource, a group of resources, several counselors, therapists, psychiatrists, whatever it may be, because not all one size doesn't fit all. You know, I would love to say that everyone that I've worked with has gotten better. Most, no, you know, some don't, and that's so. I think asking the question such as that. Well, what was it about this one? What would you like to see more in a counselor? And if they're saying, yes, I have depression and I'm upset, one of the questions that I always ask people is, what would you do if you were less depressed, more happier? Right? What would you do? Because one of the problems I have with my field is we're really, really good at talking to people about what's wrong with them. You have this, you have that, but oftentimes what we, even as counselors, sometimes don't do well is focusing our energies on how do they want to be, what do they want to do, what is the opposite of depressed? What's that emotional state look like? Mm-hmm. When you were happier, what were you doing? So
yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah. So I don't know. These are questions that can be included to at least keep that ball rolling in the right direction, that other neural pathway.
I like that a lot. I can already tell you that's one I'm going to be adding to mine. Good. Because it's really true. You know, we have to focus on positive things of healthcare too. I know in our field, I'm always trying to make sure it's not all about pain. Mm-hmm. Because yes, I care. And I think it's great that I'm going to help you with your pain levels, but it's even better if you come in that day and tell me that you were able to do something for the first time in a long time because your pain was better and doing that activity made you happy. It brought you joy. Mm-hmm. I have this really awesome patient that I saw at my initial practice, and she was phenomenal because she was a crazy cat lady like me. So we really just vibed, and I will never forget, I started treating her for low back pain, and I'd only seen her a few times, and I came in that day and I said, hey, how's your lower back doing? Give me an update. And she goes, last night I got on the floor and I played with my cat and it felt great. And like for her, like just being able to play with that cat is all she needed to be happy that week. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And she didn't even talk to me about pain that day. She was just talking to me about her cat and I could just see the joy in her face. And so I think if we focus more on what's going to make people happier and feel better and be more functional and love life more, I mean, not only are they going to love the care you're providing them, but they're going to be able to think positive thoughts more, which we already know what good that can do for the body. So
right. These things, it doesn't take long for these things to pick up momentum. I really believe that.
Agreed.
I think it paints that picture, and once you start having that imagination, right, your body starts to think, oh my God, this I could actually make this a reality. And that works, I think, for any age population. I have been reading lately a book by Jen Sincero. You guys may have heard of her. So she writes a couple of books. One is You Are a Badass. The other one is You're a Badass at Making Money. So she's got these books, and they really teach you kind of to figure out where you're at mentally, and then to challenge some of those thoughts or negative kind of, conceptions that you might have had or gotten from some, other people or your environment. And that's one of the things she does, is she really has you break down all of those thoughts and then challenge them, right? Which I think is pretty common, I think, with CBT, right? Which you
absolutely.
And it's a quick turnaround. I took one day 2 weeks ago. It was a rainy Sunday, and I wrote down all the, everything that she had outlined. And it was so interesting to just feel my own mind sort of like figuring out the right pathway. Oh, nope, that's not right. Nope, that's not right. Oh, what if I think about it this way? Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, why didn't I think of this before? And it just opens up a whole new like valley of opportunity that you maybe didn't think was possible before, or you didn't even see.
Right.
We talked earlier a little bit about some of those things they might be checking on the intake form, like they might actually just tell you that they have depression. Something else they might let you also know is that maybe they're widowed or divorced at a late age. And I'm wondering, I see health in a lot of my patients fall apart after they lose a spouse. And sometimes it's not just from sadness. It might be that their spouse did all the cooking. And so now I had one man who came to me, he told me he eats hot dogs, bread, and chocolate bars because his wife did all the cooking. Ugh. And this man has cancer. So this is not helping. No. And he just doesn't know how to help himself, right? And so losing that spouse can affect one's body in so many different ways. How important of a role do these family members play, whether they're present or maybe not present?
Huge. Absolutely. I mean, they're vital. You're talking about family members such as children or folks that relatives. Yeah, huge. Absolutely huge. Because again, what we're talking about getting momentum, right? If you got a very, very heavy rock and you put your shoulder into it, it starts to roll a little bit, but the more that it rolls, all you have to do is just push it every once in a while. Where I'm going with this is for family members to just be able to start to build momentum and fight over, and also give tasks. Okay, give tasks to the elderly person we're talking about, whoever that might be. That's huge. That is something that can help quite a bit. And for family members also to figure out ways, again, that they can have purpose, meaning, and something to be driven towards. Because the reason this guy, I don't know this person, but the reason that he's eating hot dogs, chocolate bars, and is he's probably struggling with a lot of these things, and doesn't know what else there is for him. Again, I may be wrong, but that.
No, that makes an excellent point. And I also think that giving a patient like this tasks to do is an amazing way to give them that purpose, even if they're not at a point where they're willing to discuss the fact that they have depression with you or other family members, or accept it. Even if they are willing to discuss it, maybe they're not ready to accept it. But that's such a great way that if family members can understand what to do, even if the individual just, isn't ready. Are there any other ways that you would suggest approaching an individual that maybe isn't ready to discuss it in your office or isn't ready to accept it?
Again, I would focus my energies on renaming it from depression maybe to sadness. What's stressing you out? What's frustrating you, irritating you? These are words that sound better, I think, at times. And that's where I would start, and then I would ask, so if you felt less irritated, anxious, and just more upbeat, what would you do? What would you be doing? What would be the first thing you would do? So then you don't have to talk about you're depressed, you've got this going on, you've got, again, you're starting to build in the brain what I would do. They're starting to visualize doing this behavior, right? If they're talking about it, they have to visualize themselves doing it. And that's how you start to get somebody to get out of this rut. Now, they have to practice it, right? So they're going to have repetition in that. And that's where family members come in friends, what have you. I don't know if I hopefully answered that question.
No, that makes sense. My old writing trainer used to say, only perfect practice makes perfect. So just repeating that in the right way over and over again absolutely gets you where you need to go.
Right.
Now, I know this is kind of a spinoff from what we're talking about today, but I've noticed a huge shift this year with COVID-19, of course, in all populations, but especially my elderly populations. So I practice in the state of Michigan, which happens to be one of the states that has been, I would say, on the stricter side in terms of the shelter in place, the stay-at-home orders, and things like that. And for a good period of time, several months, most elderly people were not able to see their grandkids. They were not able to hug them. They weren't able to go on vacation. And summertime in Michigan is like this strangely like coveted thing, because we only get good weather for so long. And so of course this happened in early summer, and I can't even tell you how many patients were coming in saying, I've had depression and this is something I've never experienced before, but all I want to do is have my grandchildren around me. And so of course, me as a healthcare provider, I'm monitoring this and documenting this and making sure that as the COVID-19 changes get better, are they improving? Can you think of a really good timetable of how we can revisit the depression topic? Let's say we do have a really good conversation with a patient that day, but maybe we don't see them again for a couple months. Is it appropriate to always bring up, or should we kind of feel things out a little bit? Is there a every 3 month, every 6 month? Is there any good rule of thumb for when we can have these conversations with our patients?
I don't think there's a good rule of thumb, but I don't think you should avoid it. I think it's fine to bring it up. Hey, I remember last time you were talking about you were really down. How you doing with that? What kind of things are working for you? It depends. If they're working with somebody else, I think every couple of months would be fine. Every couple of months would be fine. But again, if they're not, and they don't have contact with others, the more frequently, the better, especially if you have a relationship with them.
Yeah, I know. And you being in private practice, have you seen COVID-19 have an effect on your patients? On your clients?
Absolutely. I'll tell you, the people that get their energy from other people are struggling with this. Myself, I'm a massive introvert, so I haven't had much problem with this, but most people are not like that. And this is really difficult for most folks. Yes, absolutely. Any change causes anxiety for people, some level of stress, even if it's good. And this has turned, I think, people's worlds completely upside down. So yeah, I see this all the time, that this is a big deal. Yeah.
It's actually something that I'm literally dealing with right now. Like I said, my grandma's 95 and she happens to be living just in the last year or two in a facility because she does have some dementia. Right. And we haven't seen her since February because I'm in Florida, and welcome to Florida. We're a mess down here. So we have a lot of fun, but we're also a mess. So honestly, it has been devastating for her to not see family at all. And we actually have an aide that sits with her 24/7. So she has company. It is not the same. Zoom, not as tangible, not the same. And my uncles and I, just want to share, actually had to make a really difficult decision over the last few weeks. And we decided we're actually going to remove her at this time from that facility because we realized that while she still will have a risk potentially of developing COVID, obviously at 95, we still have aides with her. We're going to have her in a separate apartment where she can see family with limited resources because we realize she has a risk of developing COVID. This is true, but she has 100% chance of serious depression going on the way that she is. And it's been a really tough call. And I don't know that there is a right answer, but for us, that was the right choice. And I think a lot of families are having to deal with that right now.
Yeah. I mean, if you want my opinion, I think it's absolutely the right decision. I think it's absolutely the right decision. Because while I went on my spiel about introvert, extrovert, I mean, people need people, I mean, that's
especially
stupid.
At that age.
Yeah, absolutely.
It feels right.
Yes. Yeah. Good for you. Good
Thanks.
for you. You're welcome.
And just to wrap up this awesome conversation tonight, I know in another episode that we did with you talking about depression with adolescents, you gave some really good resources that we could provide our patients when necessary. And obviously with these patients, I think it's going to be important for us to, as healthcare providers, have a good referral network of not only a counselor, but a psychiatrist, and have those go-to people. Are there resources in the community for the geriatric population where they can either have a place to go for their depression, possibly meet others? I mean, what are some things we can coach our patients on that they should look into to maybe help with geriatric depression?
I think definitely having senior centers, knowing what type of activities that they have that are geared towards the elderly population, that's a great place to start. Yeah, we can talk about therapists and psychiatrists, things like that. But again, I believe that it's because of engagement, connection. That's the most important thing for this population. So again, with COVID, it's difficult, but if we're talking about just in a perfect world, or our what we deem to be our normal world, I think the biggest thing to put on your resources is any kind of senior centers, that they have activities, and many places are different, but I know several of them have 10 to 1 every day. They have some kind of activity. They have lunch, they have an activity, and then they have like a shuttle that brings them to and from.
Yeah, and to give them something to look forward to as well. I know if, some of my patients have, this is going to sound funny, but a lot of my patients play pickleball like once or twice a week. And something as simple and silly as playing pickleball once a week on a Tuesday, that might be the highlight of their week. I know sometimes even just going to see a healthcare provider, if they have a good relationship with that person, might be the highlight of their week that week.
Right.
And so all of these things, whether they seem small or simple, they really add up to great things. So.
Yes. Pickleball, senior bowling, whatever it might be. Absolutely. Yep. You're
awesome.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think these are all going to be things that people of all fields can really start to implement. And, when we see a geriatric patient and we suspect this in them, I think our brains have to be churning. Okay, how can I help them? How can I encourage them? How can I be that light in their life that day? And if I want to give them some resources, now we know how. So thank you so much for everything that you've talked with us about tonight. And we've loved having you on Better Doctor Project, Tim.
Thank you. I've enjoyed being on. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 14. We hope you'll take this information today and implement something new within your practice to better serve your geriatric patients. We only have one episode remaining for season 1, like I said before, so that's going to come out in just 2 weeks. Stay tuned for that. And for links to all of the resources from today's episode, including the TED Talk, the up-to-date guidelines, and more, please make sure to check out betterdoctorproject.com.
We loved connecting with you today on this episode of the Better Doctor Project. We can't wait to share our next podcast with you in just 2 weeks. Same time, same place. Until then, pop over to Instagram to follow us at Better Doctor Project or keep up with us at betterdoctorproject.com.
Thank you for tuning in to the Provider's Report. We hope you found today's episode valuable and inspiring. To stay updated with our latest episodes, subscribe to our podcast wherever you like to listen. For more resources and continuing education opportunities, visit our website. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of our patients and truly set a standard for value-based healthcare.